Hello, I'm Doug Watches. Welcome to the Locksmith DVD training program. The subject of this course is lock picking. There are many situations where as a locksmith you will need to be able to pick a lock open. Most of the time when a customer calls a locksmith, it is because they cannot get into their house or their business. The keys may be inside the building or they've been lost. Either way, it may be necessary for you to pick the lock open to get into the building. Customers may also bring locks into your shop and ask you to make a key for them. And in that situation, the lock may need to be picked open also. Lock picking is an essential skill for a locksmith. The better you are at it, the more confidence you will have in your ability to deal with lockouts. In this course, I will explain the structure of a pin cylinder lock along with some basic terminology. Review the most common tools used for lock picking and demonstrate different techniques for picking a lock. We will also look at the concept of bumping a lock open. Course objectives. After completing this course, you should be able to 1. Explain how a pin cylinder lock works. 2. List the basic parts of a pin cylinder lock. 3. Explain the theory of lock picking. 4. List 4 elements used in lock picking. 5. List the most common tools used in lock picking. 6. Explain how to pick a pin cylinder lock, a wafer lock, and a tubular lock. 7. List 4 different types of tension used in lock picking. 8. Explain how a manual pick gun works. 9. Explain how an electric pick gun works. 10. Explain how a plug spinner works. 11. Explain how to make and use a bump key. 12. Explain that Kwikset makes more than one version of their smart lock. 13. Give a brief history of the lever lock. This course is divided into 14 parts. Part 1, how pin cylinder locks work. Part 2, tools used in lock picking. Part 3, the theory of lock picking. Part 4, lock picking demonstration. Part 5, plug spinner. Part 6, manual pick gun. Part 7, electric pick gun. Part 8, bump keys. Part 9, advanced lock picking. Part 10, picking wafer locks. Part 11, picking tubular locks. Part 12, Kwikset smart locks. Part 13, suggested practice. Part 14 is a bonus section on the history of locks. Part 2. Okay, the way a lock works is, for a common lock, it's fairly simple. We have pins inside this plug. The first pins on the bottom are called bottom pins. There's also pins on top of those that are called top pins. And when there is no key in the keyway, the top pins will come down and block this shear line right here so that this plug cannot turn. There are springs on top of the top pins that push them down. I have a drawing here. I want to just show the inside of a pin cylinder. This one has 5 pin stacks. Some have 6. They could be from 4 to 7 or 8 or more depending on the manufacturer and how sophisticated the lock is. But this drawing here, we have 5 pin stacks. The bottom pin is called, just said, it's called a bottom pin or a lower pin. The upper pins are called top pins or upper pins. And then each stack will have a spring that's pushing that down. And what keeps the lock locked is this spring is going to push this down so that this top pin is blocking the chamber and the plug cannot turn. If you put the key in, as in this drawing here, the key has picked this lower pin up to where the top of the lower pin is even with the shear line. This is the shear line right here. The top of the plug is the shear line. Notice the key is cut deeper here because the pins are different sizes. So the object of the key is to raise all of the lower pins to the shear line. So the top of the bottom pins are at the shear line and the bottom of the top pins is at the shear line. So you basically have a gap there, and now the plug can turn. So with picking a lock, that's what we're going to do. We're going to raise the pins one at a time and try to trap the top pin above the shear line. And if we can get all 5 top pins trapped above the shear line, then the plug will turn and we can open the lock. Here's a diagram that shows the plug actually turning, and you can see the 5 lower pins are held even at the top of the shear line, and you can see the bottom of the top pins is at the shear line. This is a brand new quickset deadbolt purchased in September of 2016. If you have a quickset lock on a door, there'll be 2 screws. This is a deadbolt lock, obviously. There'll be 2 screws from the inside that hold the lock on. You just unscrew those 2 screws. You can take the lock off, and it will come apart like this. Okay, this is basically the locking cylinder here. As we go through the course, I'm going to talk about the part that holds the pins as the plug, and whatever that goes into, I'm going to call it the shell. So then whatever that fits into, for example, that fits into this piece here, I would call that the housing. So for this course, we want to make sure we know the name for the plug, the shell, and the housing, and then also a couple of other terms that I'd like you to be familiar with at this point. This cap here that covers the springs, often referred to as a spring cap or a pin cap. And then another piece is on the back here. This is a tail piece, and when you turn the plug, it has to do something to either lock or unlock the door. So this is going to move a bolt or a latch of some type, and this is one way to do it with a tail piece. Other locks that we're going to see will have a cam that will be screwed to the back of the plug. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and take this clip off the back. There's a C-clip on it. And then we can get the tail piece off. And at this point, if we put the key in the plug and turn it, the plug will come out. You'll see that it moves a little bit. It's moving in there. The reason it won't come out right now is the pin stacks are holding the plug in there. You can see if I take a key and put it in there and turn it, that it will start to come out. Now we don't want to just pull it out, because all of our top pins and springs will fly out. So the reason that I'm asking that you look for one of these locks is you can simply, if you don't have a follower, you can just take this metal cap off and take the pins out, fix it like you want it, and put the cap back on without having a follower. If you happen to have a follower, then you can turn the key, and I normally turn the key to the 3 o'clock position, just so I always know basically which way the pins are turned. And then you just take a follower and push that out. You have to keep it tight against the end of the plug, see, so there's no gap in there. And this way my pins come out. I have this facing up so they don't all fall out. If I turn this over, they're going to fall out. And with the follower in here, it's holding the top pins and springs up inside the shell of the lock. Now you can see with the key inserted into the plug, all of the bottom pins are flush with the top of the plug with the shear line. If I take them out, you'll see they drop down. Now they've all dropped down inside the plug. And if this were still in the shell, the top pins would be pushed down on top of these and blocking the plug from turning. So if I put the key back in, you'll see that once the key's all the way in, again they are flush here with the top of the plug at the shear line. Okay, so that's what we were seeing in the drawings. Now I'm going to go ahead and put this back in. And I want to show you that we can take this cap off and we can get our pins out. But what I'd like you to do is take out the two back pin stacks. Now you want to keep them in order so that you can put them back in and they will still work with the key that you have for the lock. So what we're going to do, I'm going to go ahead and put this clip back on the back just to hold the plug in there, and then we're going to just take in a screwdriver and pry the cap up carefully now, because the springs can fly out also. So you see one's trying to come out here already. Try not to bend them. Just take your time, go in there, and again, make sure it doesn't go flying off. Take this metal cap off. Okay, you take the cap off, you can see all of the springs. And what I'd like you to do is just take out the two back ones. So I'm going to take the very back one, the number 5 chamber, take the spring out, and then I'm going to just go ahead and I'm going to dump the top pin and the bottom pin out. Okay, they're not wanting to just slide out. Sometimes they will. I'm keeping my thumb or finger over the rest of the chambers because I don't want them all to come out. Okay, you can see here that it's starting to come out. This is the pin stack out of the number 5 chamber. We have the spring, the top pin, and the bottom pin. The top pins are going to normally be flat on both ends. We'll talk about different types of top pins later, but your standard top pins are flat on both ends. And then your bottom pin will normally be rounded on one end, and the rounded end will go down towards the keyway. With this particular pin here, this pin has the rounding on both ends. And so it could go back into the plug either way. But what I'd like you to do is go ahead and take out the number 5 pin stack and the number 4 pin stack, and then put the cap back on the lock and try to, as we start to pick the locks, just try to practice with 3 pins in the lock. And then once you're able to pick the lock with just 3 pins, then put the 4th pin stack back in and pick it with the 4 pin stacks in there, and then go to 5. Now I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go ahead and put this back in the lock, and all of the locks that I pick in the video will all have 5 pins. If it's a 6-pin lock, it'll have 6 pins in it. Now I notice on close examination of this pin, this is the bottom pin, that it's actually rounded on both ends. So it really wouldn't make any difference which way this pin goes back into the plug. But normally, especially with replacement pins, that's not going to be the case. This is a replacement pin, and I think you can see that this is much rounder here. This is much more pointed here on this end, and it's flat across this end. So this pointed end would go down towards the key, and the key would come up underneath it and push that up. The flat part would be up and would be hitting against the top pin. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and load this back in. And the way you load it back in, just take your bottom pin, put it back in, and again, if it's pointed on one end, make sure the pointed end goes down. Put your bottom pin in, put your top pin in, and put your spring in there. Okay, once you have your springs in there, take your cap, and your cap you want to, if it got bent, squeeze it back together and put it back into the original shape. Then just very gently put it over the pins, push them all down over the springs and push them down and push it down and make sure that it locks back in. It's on there good. Okay, now I'm going to take this plug out, and again the way I do that, I turn it to 3 o'clock. I'm going to push it out. And I want to just show you that if something happens, you drop the lock and all the pins come out. Just so you don't lose the pins, you can put them back together. You can look at your key and you can see. Now if you're not going to use the key, it doesn't really matter. You can put them in there any way you want and just pick the lock back open. But just starting out, it's probably a good idea to have a key that you can turn the lock if you need to. So some of the pins are longer than others, and we'll talk about this more in the next course, but your longest pins are going to go where your deepest cuts are at, like that, and your shorter pins are going to go like this cut here is sticking up the most, and this is our shortest pin right here, so it's going to go right there. The number 1 cut is the deepest, the number 4 cut is the next deepest, but just by trial and error, just put the key into the plug, and we said that the shortest one has to go in the number 3 spot, so put it back in there, and it should be flush with the top of the plug. So you can build your plug back. See, that one doesn't go there. I'm going to put that, it goes in the number 1. It was sticking up. Okay, then we said the number 4 was kind of deep, and that's that one. And then you can see at these pins here, this pin here is actually a little longer. Okay, the shortest one was the number 5. So that would go there, and then this would be the number 2, like so. So they're all back in there. So if you do drop your lock or everything flies apart, just take the plug out, put it together, and then push the plug in, and then you can drop in. If you don't have a follower, you can still just drop in your top pins and springs and put your cap back on, and you'll have it back together. You can see here that this works fine with this key. And we got to put our clip back on, or we could accidentally pull the plug out. When you have the key in there, if the clip is not on the back, it's very easy to accidentally pull the plug out, and then everything does go flying out. So that's the first step then in getting ready to pick the lock, is to understand how the thing works, and I think we explained that, and then to go ahead and take those 2 last pin stacks out, number 4 and 5. Now one more thing I need to explain right now is about these anti-pick pins. And again, we're looking at a quick set lock that I just purchased today right off the shelf, September 2016, and even though it's an inexpensive lock, it costs like $12. Notice it has these 2 pins here. These are top pins, and these are anti-pick pins. So the number 2 and the number 4 chambers. So you may want to go ahead and examine all of your top pins. And if you find a couple of these, just take those out to get started with, and only use the first 3 chambers with these regular pins. And what I would really recommend is that you look for an older lock, or get yourself some regular top pins and build your lock with all regular top pins, no anti-pick pins, until you get more skilled at lock picking. The anti-pick pins make it much more difficult to pick the lock, and so try to find a lock that doesn't have those, or simply take them out and not use those chambers, or replace those with regular style top pins. Now as we get started, I'm only going to be picking locks without the anti-pick pins in them. Later in the course, we're going to look at picking locks that have these the anti-pick pins in them. But starting out, the first few locks I do, I'm not going to have any of these in there. We're going to just have regular top pins. Features of the pin cylinder. Most standard residential and commercial locks contain either 5 or 6 pin stacks. A pin stack consists of a spring, a top pin, and a lower pin. Some top pins are designed to make the lock more difficult to pick or bump. Okay, parts of the pin cylinder that we should be able to recognize are the plug, the shell, the housing, pin stacks, the spring retainer or cap, and then the cam or tailpiece. Some pin cylinder locks have a removable spring cap or spring retainer. Quickset is an example of this type of lock. This feature can make the lock easier to rekey. Now, as far as tools, we're obviously going to need some lock picks to pick locks with, and you can either buy a set of lock picks that come in a kit, something like this, or you can buy individual lock picks. This is a set of 20 made by Southern Ordnance, and it's a popular set. There are many manufacturers of lock picks. You can look online or check with your supplier and see what's available. But out of these lock picks, there's basically only 3 or 4 different ones that most locksmiths are going to use. Now, as far as the shapes on the end, these are the 4 most common shapes that are used by most locksmiths. This one here with kind of an S-looking end on it, that is called a rake, and it's quite commonly used. Then the next one is a half diamond. Then we have a hook, and then we have a half ball. And again, there's many other shapes, but what you're going to find, you're probably going to end up like most locksmiths and basically use these 4. The main differences in lock picks are the metal they're made out of and the handles, basically. And you can get just a regular flex steel pick, or you can get a stainless steel pick. You can get stainless steel handles that are like on these South Ords, which are nice little handles. You can get plastic handles, or you can get basically just the flex steel with no handle. I prefer to have a little bit of a handle on my picks. Most locksmiths do. Here's an example of one that has a plastic handle. This is a hook pick. I like it real well, and you're going to see me using it in the course to pick some locks. This one is made by Peterson. These are tension wrenches that we use to turn the plug with, and I'll explain all of that in just a minute. But you can see there's different shaped handles. This is one of my favorite that has the turned handle on it, so that the flat part of the handle is 90 degrees to the part that goes in the keyway. And then you can get a double-sided tension wrench. You can squeeze this together, and so it will fit different size keyways, but also has some tension to hold it in a keyway. Now, another item that's important and usually comes in a set of lock picks is this item right here. And this is not a pick. Notice how pointed it is here on the end. This is a key extractor. And if you have a broken off key or you have debris in a keyway, you need to clean it out, the extractor can be very helpful in trying to remove the broken key or other debris from a keyway. Here's a drawing that illustrates the use of a key extractor. We go in with the extractor and try to grab the edge of the key, the top edge of the key, and then you're going to have to kind of pick up on this to push these pins up out of your way, and at the same time put pressure on that and then pull that back underneath these other pins. This is another style of key extractor. It's a sawtooth style. It does the same purpose. Again, it's just a different style. Another item you're going to need is a plug spinner. Sometimes a lock will pick easier one direction as opposed to the other. And so maybe you'll pick the lock, say, clockwise, but you have to turn it counterclockwise to actually open it. So you can pick it clockwise and then use the spinner to spin it back to the counterclockwise direction. And again, I'll demonstrate that in the course. It's a plug spinner. Another item I would suggest you pick up is a manual pick gun. This gun will flip the pins You stick the little needle part into the keyway and pull the trigger on it, and it pops the pins up, and it can allow us to pick the lock. And we'll demonstrate this also as we go through the course. Another item you may want to pick up is an electric pick gun. This does the same thing as the manual pick gun, but it can do it much more rapidly, and sometimes will come in handy when everything else fails. Sometimes the electric pick gun will help get a lock opened up. And then one last tool that I want to show is a tubular lock pick. There's a number of companies that make these, and they come in different styles and so on. But this is for picking tubular locks, or what's commonly referred to as an A-style lock. And we will demonstrate this in this course also, how to use this tubular pick tool. Necessary picking tools include a work order form, a pick set which includes a key extractor, a plug spinner, a pick gun, and lock lubricant. The four most common lock picks are the rake, the half diamond, the hook, and the half ball pick. So I have a drawing here, just a simple drawing showing the top of a plug with the chambers, 5 chambers drilled into the plug. And the point here is that no matter how precise they are, they're not going to be perfectly aligned. And because they're not perfectly aligned, now these are exaggerated. They're not going to be this bad. This is just an exaggeration to make the point. But even if they're off just 1 or 2 thousandths, it's going to make a difference. And so what happens is if you put tension on the plug to rotate the plug, the pins inside the chambers will hit against the wall of the shell. And so, for example, in this example, if you turn this clockwise, in other words, it's going to move this over, this one being the furthest to the right, this pin stack would hit against the shell first. And if you lift up on that while holding tension, turning tension on the plug, it will trap that upper pin above the shear line. And so if it traps that one, the next one probably would be this one right here. It looks like it's the next furthest to the right, and then this one, and then this one, and then finally this one. Now if you were rotating it to the counterclockwise, going this direction, then this one here obviously would hit first, probably followed by this one, this one, this one, and this one. So it's the alignment, or we should say the misalignment of these chambers that is going to help us to pick the lock open. There's a drawing that I have showing a tension wrench in the top of the keyway, putting pressure on the plug with a hook pick sliding in the keyway underneath the tension wrench and picking up the pins in the first chamber. Here's a drawing showing the tension wrench at the bottom of the keyway and using a rake pick to rake the picks with, which would be going in, sliding in over the top of the tension wrench. The idea is that we can go into the lock, put tension on the plug so that it tries to turn one way or the other, and then pick these pins up one at a time until the top pin is trapped above the shear line. Possibly we go to the middle pin, the third pin, and we pick it up. We trap its top pin. We may feel the plug move slightly. Then we look for the next pin that might be kind of sticky. Which pin is sticking a little bit? That's the one that will trap next, usually. That's the one that will trap the easiest. So we just go from pin to pin, looking for which one has a little bit of stickiness to it, and we push that one up until all 5 of the top pins are trapped above the shear line. Okay, so I put this plug back into this mortise cylinder, and I want you to notice that the plug will turn a little bit. In the locked position, it will turn slightly. And that's what we're going to use to put the tension on the pins. As As this comes around up here, the side of this plug will press against the pins, and that will allow us to push the bottom pin up, trap the top pin above the shear line, and hold it there. So that's the theory. As you begin your study of lock picking, recommend first that you take a half diamond or a hook pick and go in and just explore what the pins feel like in the lock. Pick them up, count them, get used to how much tension is on the pin stacks. And once you've done that, then put a little bit of pressure on that plug with your tension wrench, very, very light, and see if you can feel one that's now a little sticky. That's the one that we want to pick up first. We're going to pick it up and then go to the next one. Now you notice I'm letting the pressure off the tension wrench. If I don't feel what I'm looking for, it's possible I pushed one of the pins too high right off the bat, and it's not gonna unlock. So I let the pressure off and start over. You can hear them drop back down. There it is, just like that. The lock is opened. So that's the theory behind picking locks. We use the following 4 elements to pick locks: knowledge of the locks, manufacturing flaws, design flaws, and lock picking tools. I have the quickset lock here that we were looking at mounted on the display board. I'm going to pick it open. I'm going to just use a regular tension wrench and a hook pick, and I'm going to go in there and I'm going to feel for pins, just like we were talking about. Feel for which pins are a little bit sticky and pick them up to the shear line and see if we can get this lock to open. Here we go. Okay, so that's the idea. And now I'm going to go through 4 different locks, and we'll talk about different techniques as I do those 4 locks. And I have 4 locks that I've picked out here. I have a Schlage deadbolt lock, I have a quickset deadbolt lock, I have a mortise cylinder, which you will run into many of these. These are very common on storefronts that have glass doors with aluminum frames. Very popular lock. And I also have a lever handle lock that we'll try to pick. And I'm going to just try to go straight through them and pick them as quickly as I can, and at the same time demonstrate the different techniques. I would get my favorite tension wrench, and I've already explained that's the one that has the handle that's turned at 90 degrees. Well, before I put that in there, I would do a couple of things. I would take my diamond pick and I would check the lock to make sure that the lock is clean, there's no trash in there, there's no key broken off in there, that the pins are moving fairly freely. And I would also ask the owner where the key for this lock is, because it could be a miscommunication when they called you and said they couldn't open the lock, that you thought the key was missing. It might be they have the key, but the lock is broken. Maybe the tail piece broke off the back or something. So you don't want to spend time picking the lock open if the lock is broken at the back. So I try to make it a point to always ask where the key is. Then I would spray the lock with WD-40 I've already sprayed these locks. By the way, all of these locks are 5-pin locks. All 5 pins are in each of these locks. And I have, like I say, I've sprayed these with WD-40, which is one of the first things I would do once I got ready to pick the lock. And again, I try to make sure that everything is moving well in there. And then I would go to my rake pick, and the first pick I like to use is the rake to see if I can just simply rake the pins and open the lock that way. Now, just to show this one more time, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be trying to raise those pins up. So going back and forth and get them to all come to the top at the same time, get them all even up there. And then we're going to use tension with our tension wrench to hold them there, and when we get all 5 up there, hopefully we're going to be able to open the lock. When you come to the door, hopefully the lock is in the position that you expect, with the bottom of the keyway at the bottom of the lock housing. Sometimes you'll come to the job and you'll find the lock upside down. Many locks are installed upside down. So practice both ways. When we do the lever handle lock, we will have to open with the keyway on the horizontal. So practice from various positions as you practice your lock picking skills. So I've already checked to make sure the lock is clean. We sprayed it with WD-40. We asked where the key was. We know we need to pick the lock open. And then I'd begin with my rake and put light tension, very light tension on the tension wrench. Begin to rake. I usually go to the back and come forward with just light tension on the wrench. And we can listen and see when we release the tension off the wrench, do we hear any pins pop back down? And there were a couple that time that popped back down. So we know we are getting some of the pins up there. So try from the back, coming forward, and then let the tension off the wrench, let them reset, because it's possible that we pushed one of the pins up too far, and we have the bottom pin stuck up here. So let the pressure back off with very light tension. Try again, and the lock is opened. We'll take the mortise cylinder, count the number of pins, see if it's a 5 or 6 pin lock. We would check for trash, make sure there's no broken key, ask the owner where the key is, take our tension wrench, put it in the bottom, get our rake, go to the back, gently rake the pins forward. Let the tension off, start over. Normally, I only do light, medium, and alternating tension. I start at the back and rake forward, and then I'll begin at the front and rake backwards. And look, the lock opened on that one. It didn't like the back coming forward, but it opened right away on the front going to the back. So I'll go from the let me lock this back. Always turn your lock back. Remember that the owner can't get his key back in there if you don't turn it back before you leave. So to explain the different techniques that I use, and you'll again develop your own pattern, I normally go to the back and come forward. I'll try that. I'll come to the front and go to the back a few times. I'll try that, and then I'll start in the middle and go to the back, middle to the front, middle to the front, middle to the back, and I will do each of those with different tensions. I'll use light, medium, and then alternating tension. And then if that doesn't work, and I go through all of my different picks, I use the rake pick, first. I'll use the half diamond, I'll use the J hook, and that doesn't work. Then I will begin to use other techniques. I will use medium to heavy tension on the wrench, and I'll try that. Now the other thing to think about as you're doing this is, how does the tip of the tool touch the pins? Or are you touching the pins right underneath them, pretty directly on? That's one technique. The other thing that we can do is go to the side, try to go and push them more from one side or more from the other side. So all of those can be used, starting at the back, coming forward, directly under the pins, coming from the back to the front, more or less pushing to the right side. Do the same thing, pushing to the left side. Do all of those things using light tension, medium tension, or heavy tension. There's a number of ways to approach it. So you get your pattern down and just go through the pattern. Once you've got the pattern down, just go through it. Now I was going to try the diamond here, again starting at the front and going through. Well, I'd already done the back as I was talking. I did the back a couple times, and then I was ready to do the front. And there, again, the front, starting at the front works the best, and you can see that it opened again, starting at the front, with fairly light tension on the tension wrench. So there's those are two locks down. Okay, so we have the Schlage lock. We are again, going to check for trash in the lock, make sure there's no broken key in the lock. Get our tension wrench, take our rake. I normally go to the back. Now on the Schlage lock, the Schlage and some other locks have a little tighter keyways, and one thing that I've done with if I have to go to my half diamond, you see that I've filed it down a little bit on the back of it, on the back side of the pick. It's filed down so that I can get it underneath the pins easier. Sometimes it's difficult to get under the pins without raising them so high that the lock won't open. Again, I would first start with my rake with very light tension, going from the back to the front. And you can hear these pins when they come back down. The Schlage pins must have stronger springs. You can hear them popping back down. At least this one does anyway. So going from the back to the front. Now again, very light tension, try the front to the back. See if that'll do the combination that we need. Go to the middle, go back, middle, front. Try the different, what I did just then, and you see the lock open. I went a little bit to the right side of the pin, so I was more on the right side with the pressure on the pick, and you see it came right open. So that was the combination to open this. Now, I'd like to demonstrate the spinner, the plug spinner at this point. And I showed this earlier, that let's say that we picked this lock in a counterclockwise direction, and that was the wrong way. The lock would not open that way. We need to bring it the other way. So, as I pointed out earlier, that's where the plug spinner, if we bring this back to the 12 o'clock position, the top dead center, it will lock again, and we're going to have to pick it open again. So just to save time in doing that, we're going to go ahead and turn right to the right in the clockwise position and push in till you heard it set. And we want to be about the 4 o'clock position. We don't want to be at 5 or 5:30. At 4 o'clock, it gives us enough room to get some momentum so that this plug can spin back to the 9 o'clock position. So we've got it set. We just put it into the keyway, punch it. You see it came around almost to 10 o'clock. So it went right past the lock position, and now we could go ahead and take a end of a key or a screwdriver or something. We could, if the lock opens this direction, go ahead and open the lock. So that's how the plug spinner works, and that's a very important tool to have. It'll save you time instead of having to come back and pick this lock the other direction. And as I said earlier, some locks will not pick but in one direction. Now we have the lever handle lock left, and again, this is a little different because one, there's usually more play in these lever handle locks, and again, you're working from the horizontal. We'd go up, we'd get our diamond pick, check to make sure that the springs are moving, count to make sure it's only 5 pins in the lock, get our tension wrench, put it in there, and take our rake and rake that a little bit and see if we can get it opening. And get at the bottom, start at the bottom, or at the back I mean, and come to the front. Start at the front, go to the back. Very light tension on this. Starting out. If we need medium or heavy tension, we can do that, but we start out with very light. Start at the front and go to the back. Start in the middle and go to the back and come frontwards. Start in the middle, come to the front, and then go back and get the back pins. Try a little bit from one side and then the other side. If that's not going to work, you've tried that for a little bit and you have to decide how long you're going to do each technique. But if it's not working, then go ahead and try your next pick. I would go to my half diamond pick next. I would come back and go to the back and come forward, light tension on the wrench. And I maybe begin to try some medium and alternating tension along through here. But now I'm really feeling for which pins feel like they're not cooperating, which ones have the most resistance in there. Are we getting them up to the shear line? Start at the back, come forward. Start at the front and go to the back. Try in the middle on the number 3 pin. Go to the back, come forward, get the 2 and then the 1. Try that a couple times. Start at the middle and come forward. Then go and get the ones at the back. Some pin combinations are difficult, and also it's not possible to pick every lock. You will come across some locks that you will not be able to pick in a reasonable time. And that's when you go to other methods to bypass the lock or to get in the building some other way. Main thing you want to do is get the people in the building, get them in there, as quick as you can. But again, when you go up there, you want to try to relax and calm yourself, and they need to think it's going to take a few minutes for you to work. Some people don't. Some people think that you'll be able to pick that lock just like on TV when the guys walk up there and boom, they open every lock they come to like in 10 seconds. That's a little bit of a misconception some people have. Okay, so that didn't work. We'll go to the, with the hook pick, you can really feel the pins really good and see which ones are not cooperating with you. But let's say we tried this for a while. Maybe we tried both directions for a little bit. And we've been there for 10 minutes or 15 minutes. And, you know, I just didn't want to come open. Then we can go to the pick gun, which I wanted to demonstrate anyway, and so I'm going to go ahead and do that now. This drawing illustrates the use of a pick gun to pop the pins up, and if you hit them and they fly up, there's going to be a separation between the bottom pin and the top pin, and we're going to try to take advantage of that gap right in there to turn the plug and open the lock. With the pick gun, put the wrench in there, very light tension with the pick gun. Turn the tension on your gun, turn it all the way to the top towards the L to start out with the lightest tension. Do not stick the gun in too far. I'll use this cylinder to show what will happen if you put the gun in too far. Look, you're out the back of the lock. You're hitting back here, and so that's not going to be. You're not going to be able to pick that lock open like that. You need to get that back so it's only under the 5 pins. So it's only maybe an inch or so that's going to go into the lock. And so if it's not opening, check and see if maybe you're not putting that in there too far. Get the gun lined up under the pins. Again, not being in there too far. Give it a few clicks, very light tension. There it opened. That's the value of the pick gun. So I didn't really get a chance to demonstrate much with that, but had that not opened as quickly as it did, we would take this knob and turn it down a couple of turns towards heavier tension, and we would try again a few more clicks on the pick gun. If that doesn't work, then we turn it down again and go 4 or 5 clicks, turn it down again and go 4 or 5 clicks until you find the right combination. But normally with the pick gun, this tension wrench here will have very, very light tension. So we'll check and see if we'll go back to the top to very light tension, get underneath the pins, very light tension on the wrench, and there's the lock. You see the lock opened again. This lock did not want to open very easily with just using the other picks that we had available to us. 4 types of tension are light tension, medium tension, heavy tension, and alternating tension. Approach every lockout with a routine. Get written permission to open the lock. Ask where the key is, just to be sure you understand the exact problem with the lock. Check all doors and windows to see if any were left open. Check to make sure you are familiar with the lock. Don't be rushed. Tell the customer it may take a few minutes. Have a plan for picking the lock. Check for debris in the lock. Count the pin stacks in the lock. Check to make sure all the pins are moving freely. Spray the lock with lubricant. Know which picks to use. Have a plan for which order to use the picks. Have a pattern for how you're going to use each pick. Select an appropriate tension wrench. Decide which direction you want to turn the plug. Have a plan for applying and adjusting tension on the tension wrench. Know when to use a pick gun and know when to drill the lock. Okay, another tool I want to show you is the electric pick gun. This is Southford electric pick gun. There's many manufacturers of these. They're battery operated. They can flip the pins very fast, and we'll demonstrate this on a lock. I will tell you that many people are not successful with this tool. Many people seem to have better luck with a manual pick gun than they do with the electric pick gun. And I'm thinking that it probably just takes practice using the electric pick gun. Let's take a look at the instructions for using it. Okay, this gun does take 2 C-cell batteries. Talks about installing the pick in the gun, and it's pretty self-explanatory as to how that works. Says you can adjust the stroke using the Allen wrench to turn the adjusting screw located on the bottom of the unit. For most applications, a 1/8 inch movement at the tip end of the picking needle works well. So you may want to try to adjust your electric pick gun to that particular measurement of 1/8 of an inch movement. Then it talks about spraying graphite into the lock. Make sure that and of course what I use is WD-40, but you can use any lubricant in the lock. Just make sure all the pins are moving very well. And then the last instruction, it says to insert the tension wrench in the keyway below the picking needle. It says tension tool is used in place of a key to turn the lock. Apply very light, and it is, it underlines very light tension on the tool in the direction to unlock the lock. Now again, you can do it. You can turn the plug either way if you have your plug spinner to spin it back. Activate the pick by pushing the button at the top of the unit, touching the needle against the pins as it vibrates. It says, do not run the pick constantly, but use start-stop pulsations for the best results. For the best results, start with simple locks such as a desk, file cabinet, or inexpensive deadbolt, and work your way up to more precise locks. Now on this pick gun, there's a knob that controls how much the needle will vibrate at the end, and I'll demonstrate here. I'll have a larger vibration and then I'll turn it down. Okay, so that's set right now at about 1/8 of an inch, but that's again the manufacturer's recommendation for most locks. The other thing is that you can put the needle in straight, the picking needle in straight, and if it's not successful, you might raise the front of the pick a little bit or lower it a little bit and see if that will work, if just level doesn't seem to work. But normally level is the best position, but if it's not working, go ahead and try some other techniques. Okay, we have a quick set lock. It's locked. I've already shot some WD-40 in it to make sure that all the pins are moving freely and it's nice and loose. Put the pick in again level right underneath the pins. And you can go in there and you can feel them. Feel those pins a little bit. Get right underneath them, just touching them. There it is. That's simple. So I'll do it again. So again, just put the pick gun right underneath don't push it in too far, just far enough to get all the pins. Right underneath them. There it is. To use an electric pick gun, set the pick to 1/8 of an inch movement. Insert the pick into the lock, just touching the lower pins. Hold the pick gun level and use short bursts. Use very light tension on the tension wrench. Okay, here are 2 bump keys. Bump keys are simply made by taking a key blank and cutting the key to the deepest cut that the lock uses. So with the quickset lock, that would be a 6. With the Schlage lock, that would be a 9. Now, I have 2 different bump keys for Schlage. You notice this has an 8 on it here. Very, very few Schlage locks actually use a number 9 cut. So I start by trying with just 8 cuts on the key. So this is a 5-pin key blank, the SC1. All of the cuts are cut down to a number 8 cut. And then I also have another one that is cut to number 9. But normally the number 8 will work the lock faster than the number 9, simply because, again, most of the Schlage locks don't have a number 9 pin in them anyway. Now, some people will cut the shoulder of the key back a little bit, and they'll put a rubber washer on there so that they can just continue to tap the key without pulling the key back out each time they want to tap it. So there's all kinds of videos about how to make bump keys on the internet, and I'm sure that once you see how they work and you make your own and you practice with them, you'll come up with what you like to use. Okay, now a bump key works much like a pick gun works, in that we're just trying to pop the pins up to the shear line and catch them there. Instead of using the pick gun, when you have a bump key, you're simply using the cuts of the key to bounce the pins. And I'll demonstrate this. We'll open a lock with a bump key and you'll see how it works. But sometimes a bump key will work if the pick gun does not work, because it's already establishing a level for the pins to be at. And so if you try the pick gun and it doesn't work, as another resort or another resource, you could try a bump key. One thing about bump keys, you're going to have more luck with locks that don't have anti-pick pins on them. You're going to have more luck with the older locks that are a little bit worn. You're going to have more luck with the quickset locks and that style of lock than you are with the Schlage locks and the more sophisticated locks. So just keep that in mind as you try to start with the quickset, like I said, and get proficient with the quickset lock, and then move on up to see what you can do with the better locks. But one thing about bump keys is that you have to turn the cylinder the way that it unlocks. You're not going to be able to get the key out and spin the plug back. Once you turn it, it's going to lock the key into the keyway. So whereas if you pick a lock, you can spin the plug back if it's turned the wrong way. With a bump key, you're going to normally need to turn the plug the way that it opens when you bump the key. Here we have a quickset lock. The lock is locked. And we're going to use our bump key and try to bump the lock. Put the key in, pull it back, one pin back out, so that as we bump it, it has some room to go in and make the pins fly up. Put pressure on it into the direction that you will unlock the lock. There it is. So that's how a bump key works. Bump keys are normally cut to the deepest cut used by the lock. Put the bump key in the lock and pull it back one pin. Put turning pressure on the key and wrap it with a small rubber mallet. Okay, manufacturers are doing what they can to make locks more pick resistant and more bump resistant. And one of the things they do is they put in anti-pick pins for the top pins. Another word for top pins is drivers. So if you hear someone talk about the drivers, they're talking about the top pins. But this shape here basically is called a spool pin. This one's a mushroom pin. It kind of has a spool top and then thin and then getting larger at the bottom like a mushroom. Then a T-pin, and then a serrated pin where it just has grooves in there to try to catch the pin on the side of the plug as you try to push it up to trap the top pin. Now there's all different designs of these, all different shapes of these 4 basic designs. So just start to pay attention, look at the top pins, and you can start a collection of the different ones that you come across, where if you can get an extra anti-pick pin, just make a collection of them so you can have them and know basically which manufacturers use which ones. Another technique designed to try to stop picking and bumping of locks is to have what's called a paracentric keyway, where the wards of the keyway try to block the picks from going into the keyway, or at least make it very, very difficult to get the picks in the keyway. In this example, you can see that the pin is basically right up against the bottom of this warding right here. Basically, the definition of paracentric, if a ward comes past the middle of the keyway, then normally it's considered a paracentric keyway. Okay, I've added the anti-pick pins. The spool pins are back in the lock. We're in positions 2 and 4, and we're going to see now if we can pick it with these. This is the same lock we picked earlier without the spool pins, but I've added them back in there, and I've got the lock in the locked position. Let me reset it. Go through the same process. Start at the front, go to the back. Okay, the third one was catchy, the fourth one was catchy. There we go. So you can see that you can pick the lock with the anti-pick pins in there. I do think it takes a lighter touch. I'm going to try to pick it back the other way now. There we go. It's back to the locked position now. This is a brand new Schlage deadbolt, again purchased in September of 2016. We're going to take a look at this lock. Okay, so again, this is the Schlage spool pin, and the Schlage deadbolt that we're going to pick has 4 of these in the lock. So I said it's a brand new lock, and it came off the shelf with 4 of these pins in there. So just expect that. Basically, with all the locks you buy today, you might as well expect anti-pick pins in them, but especially with the new Quickset and the Schlage locks. Okay, I have our Schlage lock mounted here on the display board, and we're going to try to pick this. Again, we got the 4 anti-pick pins in there and the 1 normal pin. And as I try to pick a Schlage lock, I normally will try to pick it in the counterclockwise motion or direction, because I have more room. Right here at the bottom, I get more room. If I put the tension wrench the other way, there's less room directly under the pins. So I will normally try to pick the lock in the counterclockwise, and then I would have to spin it back in the other direction. And I go ahead and just like the other locks, I try to rake it first. Make sure there's nothing in the lock, just the normal procedure. I've already sprayed a little WD-40 in here. And then go ahead and rake it. See what you can get. I mean, you never know. Even with the anti-pick pins, you never know. Some of these will open, very few will open easily. Most of them are a real headache to get open. But I don't feel too many pins sticking up there raking it, so we're going to go ahead and try with the hook pick and go in there and just like regular, just go ahead and start picking just like normal. Now we have an advantage in that we know we have 4 anti-pick pins in here in chambers 1 through 4. We already know that. But one thing, when you don't know, one thing you can try to pay attention to, as I was trying to explain earlier, is that with a spool pin and a mushroom pin and lots of these anti-pick pins, if you pick it up and you feel the tension wrench give a little bit, And then as you pick the pin more, does the tension wrench try to come back? Does the plug try to turn itself back a tiny bit? And if it does that, that's an indication you have an anti-pick pin. So it just takes a lot of practice and a lot of feel to get used to that. But if you pay attention, you'll notice that with these pins. Now with this narrow keyway, often as you try to go past the front pins to get to the back pins, you knock those out of position. So with the Schlage in particular, I will often just go to the back and try to work forward. There it is. Okay, now that was pretty quick for a Schlage lock. And like I said, don't expect that without a little bit of practice. I used kind of light tension, and then I increased my tension as I felt 2 or 3 of the pins were picked. Then I increased a little bit of tension on the wrench. But these are just things that you're going to have to just try. And every lock is basically different. So what we would have to do now, we'd have to spin that back, and then we could pull the bolt. That's the way I go about trying to pick a Schlage lock. And we have a brand new Schlage lever handle lock, again purchased September of 2016, that we're going to look at. Put the key in, turn the key, release the locking wafer. Notice how this spring retaining cap floats up here, and the springs are pushing it up. Well, these have T-pins in them, and I'll just show it to you real quick. This is the Schlage F style. I'm just going to show you the pin here. That this is a T-pin. Okay, so you can see here the T-pin the Schlage uses in these F-cylinder locks, and I will tell you these are very difficult locks to pick. With that floating cap they have, combined with these T-pins in all 5 chambers, I just find it a very difficult lock to pick open. And the only way I've really been very successful is using a hook pick. I have not had much success with a pick gun. You can try the pick gun, see what kind of luck you have, but I've had much better luck just using a regular hook pick to pick this lock open. I put it on the door here. It is locked. I had the door open. It was easier to get a better shot with the camera with the door open. So I have the door open. I'm going to try to pick this. I will tell you, this is a difficult lock to pick. And I start basically all Schlage locks trying to pick them in a counterclockwise direction using the hook. Go in there and just start trying to find which ones might cooperate. But with these T-pins in here and this particular style of lock cylinder they have, I can tell you that I end up drilling quite a few of these. This Schlage F-Series lock was the most difficult lock picked on this video. It took nearly 6 minutes. I used only a hook pick and light to medium tension. To save video time, we are only showing about 2 of the 6 minutes. There it is. You should be familiar with 4 types of anti-pick pins: spool pins, mushroom pins, T-pins, and serrated pins. Top pins are often referred to as drivers. A plug that tries to turn itself back as you raise the top pin indicates an anti-pick top pin. Manufacturers use both anti-pick pins and paracentric keyways to make locks pick and bump resistant. In a paracentric keyway, the warding protrudes out past the middle of the keyway. For picking difficult locks, try to use a hook pick with very light to medium tension. In tight keyways, position the tension wrench in the best way to allow more room under the pins. To avoid unsetting the front pins, it is often necessary to pick the pins at the back of the lock first. Here we have an illustration of a wafer lock with the key in it raising the wafers to the shear line. So it's the same as the pin tumbler lock to open. The difference is the shape of the tumblers. And I went over this in the course number 1 about the wafer locks. But to pick the wafer lock open, it's the same principle as the pin tumbler lock. Put pressure on the plug and pick up each one of the wafers to the shear line. The wafer lock will have 2 shear lines. Is one difference, that without the key being in here, there would be springs on these lips that would push these wafers down, so they'd be blocking down here. But if you pick it up too high, it can block the other side. So that's one difference. But most wafer locks, if they're single-sided wafer locks, most of those are fairly easy to pick open just using a rake pick. If a rake pick doesn't work, then you could go to a hook or a diamond, half diamond, and get the wafers picked to the correct position. Okay, this is a lock on a metal cabinet. It's a wafer style lock. The lock has to be turned 180 degrees. The lock plug has to turn 180 counterclockwise to be normal to open the lock. And I can go in there and count the wafers. There's 5 wafers in there. 5 wafers. And they're springing up, so I know that we have to push them down to get the lock to pick open. So we're going to just take a rake pick and just see if we can rake them. I'll put this tension wrench in up here, and hopefully we'll have enough room. And that's how simple that was to open a wafer style lock. Just like that. So I could pick it back. Now the wafers are up now. So if I wanted to put it into a closed position, now I would go clockwise and I would have to rake the top to put that back where it was. And you can see it's not quite as easy. It doesn't want to go back to the lock position quite as easy as it came open, but there it goes. So there, now it's back in the locked position. And I'll do it once more. I'll just go ahead and unlock it again. So now we have to rake on the bottom, what is now the bottom part of the keyway, because I've turned it around. There it is. So that's picking your wafer style lock, and most of them, especially if it's a single-sided key, meaning they're not opposing wafers, the wafers all go one direction, most of those are that easy. Opposing wafers can be a bit more difficult. You have to just rake both sides and pick both sides of the keyway to open a double-sided wafer lock. Let's review some of the features of the disc or wafer lock. Disc locks get their name from the shape of the tumblers. Historically, the standard disc tumbler lock had 5 tumblers, but many have less than 5. In automotive use, they often have more than 5. When picking the disc tumbler lock, check to see how many wafers are in the lock which direction they are moving, and if there are opposing wafers. I have here a drawing illustrating the interior components of a tubular lock, often referred to as an ace lock. The reason they're called ace locks is the Chicago Lock Company sold a lot of these under that brand name. They called them, that was their trade name basically, was the ace lock. So they're often referred to as ace locks. Technically it's a tubular lock. But you can see the pin stack here, and it looks the opposite of what we looked at earlier with the spring being on the bottom, and then this would be the top pin and then the bottom pin. But it's the same concept as the other pin tumbler lock that we looked at. You can see with the key in it, it pushes the bottom pins to where they're flush with the shear line, and the lock can be turned. So we're going to go ahead and try to pick open one of these locks. Okay, this is a cable lock. This is the locking part of it. The bolt part is here, the cable. This hooks around through the cable and secures both ends of the cable. And you can see it is a tubular lock. This might be a little more difficult in that the pins are further down in there, but we'll see if we can pick this lock. Okay, we're going to try to pick this lock using this HPC tubular lock pick. This is a less expensive pick. It just works by putting a rubber band around these 7 picks that slide down, and they have more expensive ones that have an adjustable nut that you turn and you can increase the tension on the picks. But this is one that bought many years ago, and I just never did upgrade it. But the way it works is you have a big washer here. You push the picks down. You see them coming down here at the end of the tool here, and then you just take them on a table or something and push down so that they're all even with the bottom of the tool. And then the way you adjust the tension is you have less tension on the rubber band, so you can either make it tighter or make it looser, but you simply line the pick up with the lock, and once it goes on there, you'll feel it go on. Then just gently wiggle it as you push down. And if it's all the way down and it doesn't come off, then take it back up and start over. But you can see, I'm going to zoom in some for this. Well, it did not move too many of our picks. Now, I may have too much tension on the rubber band here, so we're going to try to loosen that up a little bit, and then we're going to try that again. Get back up here so you can see. So again, take your washer and push all your picks down, then put it on the table. Push all your picks so that they're even. There's a little post inside that has to line up with the slot on the plug on the lock here, and then the 7 picks should be lined up with the pin stacks. So we'll try that again. And then actually, once you do this, you can measure how far the picks are pushed up, and you can actually cut a key for it. So push in gently while you're kind of wiggling and turning the tool. All the way down. Okay, now let's look and see how many of the picks moved. And again, I'm not getting too much movement on my picks. This one's up a good little bit. That one's up some. These two here are not moved here. So there may still be a little bit too much tension. I don't think so. I think it should be about right. You can kind of tell as you push them down how easy they are to push down. They should be fairly easy, but you should have resistance. So we'll try again. Okay, still did not open the lock, and I'm just kind of inspecting here to see. Looks like almost all of them are moved a little bit, so I think the tension's about right. Felt like it turned. Oh yeah, there we did. We got it open. See? Okay. Well, that took a little while using the wrench, but I'll go ahead and if you don't have one of these, you can pick these the old-fashioned way, and I'll show you how to do that. Tools I'm going to be using to try to pick this tubular lock. I've got a tension wrench. It's kind of a narrow gauge wrench that works pretty good. This is actually a hook pick that's been broken, and then I have a regular hook pick, and then I have a scribe with a real thin point that I may use occasionally if one of them is kind of hard to push. We'll see what we have to do with that. So that's kind of the equipment that I'm going to use, and then first thing, of course, is to put our tension wrench and to hook that little notch in there the best we can. So anyway, so you got tension on the plug, and we just like we did before, we just check them to see if any of them have a little bit of resistance. I'm going to increase my pressure a little bit because I'm not feeling really any resistance to these. I let the tension back off, then it reset. Now I'll move some then. We could have just one pin holding it now. I'm going to increase the tension on that a little bit more. Go back around, see if I'm able to do any better. There, I got it. Okay, so that's how you can pick a tubular lock, but like I say, they do take some practice. Now, one issue with this, having picked this, of course, we got this loose, so the customer should be happy with this. But this is now trapped off center. It's one pin over, and it's trapped there. And to get that back, of course, I would have to re-pick it and move it back counterclockwise one position. Let's review some of the features of the tubular lock. Tubular locks are often referred to as ace locks. Ace was actually the trade name Chicago lock used for tubular locks. The standard tubular lock has 7 pins arranged in a circle. The tubular lock uses a tubular-shaped key. Tubular locks use a pin stack similar to normal pin cylinder locks. The theory for picking the tubular lock is the same as the normal pin cylinder. Special tubular picks are available for picking tubular locks. Okay, if you come up on a lock like this is a quick set lock, and you see this little slot here, this is a smart lock. And I know on YouTube there are people that claim they can pick this lock open or they can force it open. But what I want you to know is that there is more than one version of this lock, that Kwikset has continued to rework this lock, and I know there's at least 2 versions. There could be more than 2 versions, but the newer smart locks cannot be picked. I would say they're next to impossible to pick. The old ones can be, but they're very difficult. The old ones could be forced open if you knew how to do it, but the new ones I don't believe can be forced without destroying the lock. So if you come up on one of these, I do not advise to waste time even trying to pick it or to force it. I would drill it. It does have a sidebar. It's a hybrid lock. The way it goes together is it goes into the housing here, and then there's a clip that you just take off, and then you take the clip off right here, it just pops right off, take the plug out. Anyway, there's another clip here that holds this in here. And see if this will slide out. This is really a hybrid lock. It has parts of a pin tumbler and parts of a wafer lock, and then it also has a sidebar. And has a ball bearing that was right here for drill protection. It's got one on each side. Here's the sidebar here. I'm going to take the sidebar out. Now then, you just, on this piece here, you just push it down towards the spring. And it will come up free, like so. Okay, so when I remove the wafer side of the lock, you can see the pins. And if I push a key in to the cylinder, this key's cut at 14233, it looks like. Push it in there, you're going to see those pins move up. See, they all moved up. And if you'll notice here, these lips on these pins, this is what grabs the little wafers and pulls the wafers up, so that when you pull those up, it aligns the wafers in the correct spot to allow the sidebar to retract into the plug. We'll look at it more in a later course, but it does have a sidebar here, and I would drill it in this area right here, back. Here's, you can see the sidebar here, back to the end of the sidebar. In other words, basically back to the end of a key blade. Drill it that far, and then you can just drill the whole center of the lock, but do not drill it too far and drill the tailpiece off. That's going to just cause more trouble. And we'll talk more about drilling locks in a later course. But for right now, I just want you to know that there's more than one version of this lock, and the new versions are very, very difficult, if not impossible, to pick open, and to try to force them will usually destroy them. Just to summarize the Kwikset Smart Lock. The older style lock could be forced open. It could also be picked, but it was very difficult to pick. The newer style lock is basically pick-proof. The newer style probably can be forced, but it would most likely destroy the lock. To be able to pick locks takes practice. If you stop doing it, you'll probably lose your touch. So continue to practice as much as possible and practice on as many different types of locks as possible. Begin to acquire tools, picks, tension wrenches, key extractor, pick guns, etc. Collect as many different types of locks as you can. Practice picking the locks. Start with 3 or less pin stacks and add pin stacks when you are ready. Be sure to comply with the legal requirements in your area for doing lockouts. You can usually find this information from the same office that issues your locksmith business license. If you have any doubts, consult an attorney. That concludes the basic skills portion of this course. If you would like to learn more about the history of locks, please continue with this bonus section. We are going to learn about the development of the lever tumbler lock. We're going to review the slide bolt. We're going to look at the single lever tumbler lock. We'll look at Robert Barron's multi-lever lock. We'll look at Chubb's multi-lever lock. We'll learn about Alfred C. Hobbs, and we'll also learn about Solomon Andrews and Robert Newell. You recall that in the last course we talked about the history of the warded lock and the slide bolt. And we talked about how on the bottom of the slide bolt that in time they put a couple of notches and they would have something to hold the slide bolt in the locked or unlocked position, and as the key came in and turned, it would pick the slide bolt up and move it back a little bit. Well, after a while, and we're not really sure exactly when, someone came up with the idea that maybe to make this lock more pick resistant, they could put a couple of notches on the top and do something very similar in that there would be some type of lever that would be attached to the wall and pivot down, and so it may look something like this. And then when in the locked position there would be a lug, which was referred to as a stump originally, that would be connected to this lever. And then as the key came in and turned, it would also, the key would pick up the bolt, but it would also pick up this lever to move this stump up out of this notch and again allow the bolt to slide back and align itself with the other notch again to help hold the lock in the open position. And that would have been the first lever tumbler lock. Here's another drawing to illustrate how the lever would work. Here we have the key and it's turning and it's moving the bolt out going this direction here, and as the key turns, it picks the lever up, which frees the stump out of this first notch, and then it will, as you continue to turn and push the lever out, this notch will come up underneath where the stump is, and the lever will drop back down, putting the stump back in that notch and holding the slide bar in that position. Here you can see the bolt out and the stump on the end of the lever back in the notch here. In France, in 1767, a paper on locksmithing was published called The Art of the Locksmith that described a lever tumbler lock. So we know that lever tumbler locks existed by that year. 11 years later, Robert Barron, an Englishman, patented a lock which included double-acting tumblers as well as wards. The lever tumbler was a significant improvement in security over the standard warded lock. The Barron lock had 2 tumblers, and the key had to raise each tumbler by a different amount before the bolt could be retracted. This is a drawing of the Robert Barron lock that was patented in 1778, and he did 2 things that were very significant. One, he had added another tumbler. He had 2 tumblers, and they had to be raised to different heights, so the key would have to be adjusted for the 2 different heights. The second thing he did was he had his tumblers be double acting tumblers, in that if they were raised too high, they would relock the lock by catching these teeth up here in the top of the bolt. Here you can see a drawing with the levers raised to the correct height, and these stumps, as they're called, which were attached to the levers, would be in this gap or this gateway so that the bolt could move and the key could push the bolt into the locked position. Now notice that the bolt has been cut out, and the stumps on the levers move up and down inside this area that has been cut out of the bolt. In 1817, the dockyards at Portsmouth, England were burglarized. As a result of that crime, the British Crown offered a reward to anyone who could make a pick-proof lock. In 1817, as a result of the offer by the British Crown, which I mentioned earlier, Jeremiah Chubb of Portsmouth, England, went to work to make a pick-proof lock. In 1818, he patented a lever tumbler lock, which proved to be good enough to win the prize offered by the British Crown. Chubb improved on the lever tumbler lock by incorporating what he called a detector. The detector was a retaining spring, which acted as a relock device. Here we have a drawing of the Chubb's lock. Here's the levers here. You see the pattern with the gateway in the middle of the levers. You see the stump on the side of the bolt. The bolt is unlocked right now. It's in the open position. And the difference is, you had more levers, and you also had tighter tolerances with this lock, but we had the addition of this detector device up at the top up here. And you can see that the levers have a little protrusion here that if you push this too high, it will cause this lever to push up here and then come down over here and grab the bolt in this notch right here. There was a spring that would hold it there. So that's basically the way that worked. Here you can see the bolt. Currently it's moving towards being in the locked position. The stump on the side of the bolt is passing through the gateway. The detector device is still not engaged, and the lock is functioning properly. Once the detector device was engaged like that, you would have to have the correct key to unlock the lock. Now you'll notice in the Chubb's lock that it is the levers that have the cutout and not the bolt like we saw in the Barron's lock. And this is the same basic design that we see today. The cutout, the traps that hold the lug or the stump are in the lever. Okay, this is a lever tumbler lock. It's a brand new lock. You can see the bolt. You can see the levers here. You can see the post it's attached. And you can see that how the levers are cut out. That this is the same basic design that we saw in the Chubb's lock. It is still used today. I want to talk about a guy by the name of Alfred C. Hobbs for just a minute, and then we'll take a look at the company he worked for. The story of Alfred Hobbs is somewhat long and quite interesting. I do not have time to talk about all of his accomplishments, but I want to share part of them and then encourage you to do more research on this individual. To put it simply, Alfred Hobbs was probably one of the world's greatest lockpickers. In April of 1851, he boarded the steamship Washington bound for Southampton, England, with his own set of lockpicks. His official assignment was to sell a new lock called the peritoptic lock, which was the newest lock developed by his employer, the New York City-based company of Day and Newell. He was to sell this lock at a trade show in London, London's Great Exhibition of 1851. Of all the locks at the Great Exhibition in July of 1851, the Chubb detector lock was thought to be the top of the class. According to an official report, soon after the exhibition opened, Mr. Hobbs obtained one of the Chubb detector locks and opened it in a space of 10 or 15 minutes in the presence of several gentlemen. The Chubb Company challenged Hobbs to try a more difficult task. The Chubb's lock attached to an iron door of a vault in Westminster that was a depository for valuable papers. Hobbs accepted the challenge and invited the company to watch. Hobbs met his skeptical onlookers at the chosen location. He took out his picks and went to work. Within 25 minutes, he had the lock opened. He had once again successfully picked a supposedly pick-proof Chubb lock. He was asked to do it again, so he relocked the lock and picked it again a second time within 7 minutes. Needless to say, with the reputation of the Chubb lock on the line, this caused quite a commotion. Later that summer, Hobbs also picked the Brom Precision lock, which had never been picked since it was manufactured in 1790. Hobbs invented his own lock, which he called the Protector, and started his own company to manufacture and sell that lock. In somewhat of a turnabout, the Hobbs lock was picked by a Chubb's locksmith in 1854. I want to mention two other people, both Americans, who made significant contributions to the lever lock. The first, Solomon Andrews, a New Jersey locksmith, designed this lock right here and patented it in 1836. Now this is designed for a safe vault. And what was unique about this is the first really rekeyable lock. And the way he did it, he has two sets of levers. There's a primary set up here alongside the bolt, and then there's a secondary set that are arched levers, which you see back behind this plate right here. And I've never actually seen one of these locks other than a picture or a drawing. And my understanding is of the way it works is that these secondary levers can be fairly easily taken out and rearranged to rekey the lock. The key was also unique in that the bitting on the key was rekeyable. In other words, the bits could be rearranged. This is the key that Solomon Andrews came up with, and it has a square shank that these bits slide over. There's a screw on the end, this piece comes off, and then the bits would slide off. And the bits had a square hole in them. You would simply slide them over the square shaft and align them in such a way as they correlate with the tumblers. All of the bits were numbered so that if you had a number 3 tumbler, you would get a number 3 bit in the same location. Now the other unique thing that he did was, if you wanted to simply do a quick rekey, he had these spacers that you could add. And if the lock were in the open position and you added a spacer to your key and closed the lock, that would basically rekey it. You could only open it with the spacer in the correct location. So that again was a unique feature of this Solomon Andrews lock. He called this lock the combination lock. The original lock only had 13 lever tumblers in it, but in 1842 he upgraded the lock to have 17 levers, and he also included a Chubb-style detector. Another safe lock designer, Robert Newell, a partner in the New York firm of Day and Newell, invented a lock which is known as the peritoptic lock. The lock used 2 sets of tumblers, which were more interactive than what Andrews had designed. It also incorporated a plate that revolved with the key and prevented the inspection of the interior of the lock. This prevented the lock picker from being able to see up inside the lock. Like the Andrews lock, the peritoptic lock also had interchangeable bits. Now this is a picture of a drawing of a peritoptic key, and the way it worked, this would come apart. There was kind of a carriage here that had the pins in here, and this would slide off. There was a pin that went through the center of the bits also. You take it out, and then you could rearrange the bits. And of course you want to do this, with the lock in the open position, you rearrange your bits, and then you close the lock back. And what was significant about the peritoptic lock is that the lever tumblers would automatically adjust to this new key bitting when you closed the lock. So you did not have to take the case off the cover and remove the tumblers inside the lock at all. The peritoptic lock is probably one of the most complicated lever tumbler locks ever made. And just as a side note, there is a YouTube video on YouTube right now that shows an actual working peritoptic lock. I'd encourage you to take a look at that. Let's review what we learned in this section on the history of locks. We know that the lever tumbler lock existed in 1767 because in that year a French treatise, The Art of the Locksmith, described many examples of lever tumbler locks. We do not know when the first lever tumbler lock was made, nor who made it. In 1778, Robert Barron, an Englishman, patented a lever tumbler lock with significant improvements. It used two levers. The levers were double acting, and each lever had to be raised to a different height. As a result of a break-in, in 1817, the British Crown offered a reward for a pick-proof lock. Jeremiah Chubb invented a lock that was good enough to win the prize in 1818. The Chubb lock had several improvements over the Barron lock. It used 6 levers, had improved precision to manufacturing, and it included what he called a detector, which was similar to a relock device. In 1851, Alfred C. Hobbs of New York picked the Chubb detector lock at the London Exhibition. In 1836, Solomon Andrews, a New Jersey locksmith, received a patent for a bank vault lock with these features. It contained 13 primary and 13 secondary levers. Tumblers and key bits were designed to be accessible by the owner. It allowed for a quick rekey by using spacers in place of key bits. It allowed the owner to completely rekey the lock by rearranging the tumblers in the lock and the bits on the key, making this the first rekeyable lock. In 1842, Andrews upgraded the lock to use 17 tumblers and a Chubb-style detector. Robert Newell, another American inventor, received a patent in 1844 for what he called the peritoptic lock. The lock's features include: it used 2 sets of lever tumblers, it had a revolving plate to prevent the inspection of the interior of the lock, the key had interchangeable bits, and the tumblers would automatically adjust to a new key bitting. That concludes this course. I want to thank you for buying this course. We hope you found it informative. Please visit our website at www.locksmithdvd.com and review our other videos that are available for purchase.